Thrilled they're here. They kind of need no introduction. They are iconic captains of both England and Ireland. They're good friends. They know each other. I don't think they've ever been on stage together like this publicly, so this should be a lot of fun. Welcome, please, Martin Johnson, Keith Wood, everybody! All right. You're very welcome. Take a seat. Take a seat. Oh. Well, we weren't sure which side you were going to pick.
It's a long time ago. You never forget.
He did the right thing this
Put
time.
it in there.
He went onto the grass himself.
We were playing that way. We warmed up that side. We ran out that side. Get on with the game. That's all I said. And we're still talking about it.
Well, this doesn't make up for it, just because you picked the right side this time. Well, seen as, let's just get rid of that one quickly. We won't spend the whole night talking about it. But here is, I'm sure you all know, obviously, in 2003, it was a Grand Slam decider in Dublin. Ireland were not used to Grand Slam deciders, had not won a Grand Slam since 1948. We were pumped, and you came onto the field, and I don't want to misrepresent it, but completely disrespected our president. So let's just have a look at the video.
So the truth is, the Irish boys, made her walk on the grass. That's the truth. We have the red carpet in front of us. So that don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. The truth of that is, you're right. You were going for a Grand Slam, which made it a huge game, even bigger. But we'd blown so many in the previous few years that for us, the big thing, our coach said to us on Wednesday, Clive said to us on the Wednesday before the game, we sort of have an end of sort of training review, and he just said to us, what we've been through the last few years in terms of like 2001, losing in Dublin, 99 at Wembley, Murrayfield 2000, it's ridiculous, it's crazy. We should have won one or two Grand Slams. And he said to us, there's nowhere for this team to go if you don't win on Sunday. There's nowhere for the team to go if you don't win. That's a massive statement. You know, it's a World Cup year. There's nowhere for you to go if you don't win. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, that's a huge call. But then I thought, you know what, he's right. He's absolutely right. It's ridiculous us losing some of these games that we've lost. And we just need to go and win the game. And so that was the mindset. It seems ridiculous sitting here 20 odd years later, but it felt like do or die for us. You know, so you're out on that field, you're in Ireland, and suddenly the whole thing's ramped up because you're going for a Grand Slam. When we came to Ireland previously, I remember when I first came over, the players, the older players would all say, listen, don't get sucked in with the hospitality, because we used to stay out at
Killiney.
Somewhere, yeah, is it Fitzpatrick Castle?
Yeah.
A lovely, lovely hotel. The ladies in there would be lovely. They'd feed you up with cakes and sandwiches. And you start enjoying your trip, and they'd tell you, you know, oh, look after, don't bully our lads on Saturday, and all that chat would come out. Then you go to Lansdowne Road, and they try and kick your heads off. You know, it would be, but it wasn't like that in 2003. It was very, very, it was pumped up. And as we left, we didn't stay there. We stayed in town, 4 seasons, I think. As we left the hotel, we had 200-300 people in reception, right in our face, right in our grill, come on, giving it the big one. And it was great because it was full on right from the start. So that whole mindset was just building that whole week. So when we got out there, so we'd warmed up that side. Normally when you play, you see the pre-game, one team warms up one side, one team the other, and that's your end. And then we were playing, Ireland won the toss, we were playing that way. So we just ran out that way. There's a natural thing for us to do is run out that way. And what kicked it off, if the referee had just said to me, just swap sides, we'd have done it because it's the referee and it's actually no big deal. We'd have done it. But I think they sent out, with due respect to him, the groundsman and second assistant. Right? This guy comes out, and when you, I cringe a little bit watching it, but when you're in that headspace, we're going into full action imminently, right? I've got no interest in meeting anyone at that point, right? With due respect, the second coming of Jesus Christ, do you mind? We've got a big game, right? Because you have, that's trouble right there, isn't it? That's trouble. But, you know, whatever. I'm listening to my players, my coaches, that's it. Everyone else, because we were away from home. When you're away from home, you're England anywhere, because they don't like you anywhere. But that, you know, Grand Slam, so it was massive, massive game. So when he said, move the fellas, I said, with due respect, get lost, we'd just get on with the game. But the crowd then went mad. The crowd went insane. It was like going berserk. And you see Graham Rowntree next to me, Wig next to me there, smirking away. And Neil Back was somewhere in that queue as well. And he's really, really cold, horrible little cold, nasty man. I can get a bit animated and a bit. And Neil's there just going, you can't move now, you've got to stay, you've got to stay. And I'm thinking, what are they going to do? Are they going to come in? Because it was a little pause, and I thought, your police have guns. Is it a gunpoint thing? And of course, it all sort of happened. But before you kicked off in that game, you probably don't remember it. You on commentary?
I was commentating.
Your commentary. The crowd sang Fields of Athenry. And the only time in my life the hairs on the back of my neck went up. The atmosphere was awesome. The atmosphere was awesome. And it was aggressive. You know, we were getting things thrown at us in the warm-up. But you love that, right? Because you'd rather that than indifference. So it was a super, but it was, for us, it was everything. We had to win. Yeah. It's a World Cup year. We were playing, the next test match we played was New Zealand. But at that point there, that's us, do or die. We either walk off this field winners or there is no tomorrow. Which sounds overly dramatic.
No,
it's out here as a 50-something year old.
I know.
Bloke,
no, it's understandable.
We were in the commentary box and had no idea what was going on. So we were trying to figure out what the hell is going on. But a couple of years after he retired, we were doing a corporate function over in Dublin. He said, no, I don't want to come over. I'm going to get an awful lot of grief. I said, nobody's going to give you any grief. It'll be fine. Everything will be absolutely grand. And we stepped outside of a taxi, and we're just standing on the side of the road near Balls Bridge, and another taxi drives past. Johnson, you bollocks! And he said, come on, buddy. I said, I know, the guys inside will be fine. They weren't either, actually.
You were an injured Irish captain.
Yeah.
In the BBC studio.
Yeah.
If you had been a fit Irish captain.
Well, that's a great question.
It is a great question, and I don't even know what the answer was. And I was thinking at one stage, and you think about this retrospectively, and you think, well, then it's fine because you're very brave retrospectively. And I said, sure, we might just stand in front of them. What would happen? Then you'd have ended up with loads of guys pushing. It could have been a scrap beforehand. We'd had a little bit of trouble the year before, so there was kind of a bit of manners was trying to be put onto. We were playing France, and at half-time, there used to be a little 2 gates on the halfway line to go in and out off the pitch. And the Irish and the French teams were going in at the same time, and Frank Tournaire, the French prop, was there, and we both...
Mad Frank.
Mad Frank. Both of us went to try and go through the gate at the same time. A kind of comedy moment. We both got stuck in the gate, so we both stepped back out again, and we both went back in again at the same time. And Frank just gave me a bit of a push, and one of the stewards hit him a box. How dare they push Woody? He's very sensitive. So we were kind of trying to figure out what we should do. So this was, I think, the following year or 2 years afterwards. And we'd been warned we couldn't go off the same time as the other team. And there was a whole load of different things going on. I have no idea what I would have done. I still have to say, I'm happy to hang him out to dry. You should have apologised afterwards. You know, there was a disrespect thing, which you didn't mean, but when you noticed it afterwards, that's what a bigger man would have done. I thought. Did you call us friends at the start of this?
She was very, very popular in Ireland, wasn't she?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So our politicians are never particularly liked, so no one would be bothered if they were deemed to be insulted. Yeah. But I didn't make her walk on the grass. That's my.
You're sticking to it.
Yes, yeah. But it's true.
It's sort of true. Are you two friends?
Absolutely.
Would you talk often?
A good bit, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I don't know whether, like, you don't meet a whole lot anymore. Like when I retired, we both retired around the same time. Unfortunately, he was a few weeks after me from international rugby. You'd meet, but like I was working on TV, you don't meet a huge number of people, you meet a very small group of people because you're traveling on a Friday or a Saturday or Sunday or whatever it is, and you're meeting up the night before, and it's great. But then over time, you kind of get to meet at different things. We got on well because, like, we toured with the Lions. That's an amazing way to bond. It's just an extraordinarily difficult thing to do together, and a lot of people kind of gloss over it or think it's overhyped up. But it's very difficult to go with guys who are obviously really good players, but play a different style, different calls, different philosophy, and you have to try and blend in a short period of time. That's very difficult. But because of that, you end up with a really strong relationship, which is cool. And not with everybody, because it's not everybody gets on, but we got on pretty well, and it's kind of cool. It's just kind of cool to meet up all the time. So even something like this for me is exciting because we're inside chatting. I mean, the most random things because he's incredibly random. But the idea of just kind of catching up and having fun and meeting, and an odd time for dinner. We can touch on it in a while, but we met up with a reunion from the Lions, a 25-year reunion a couple of years ago, which was emotional and extraordinary and an unbelievably cool thing. And you kind of remember that you were part of it 25 years ago, and then you bring your wives now, and that they can kind of see, and you've changed over the 25 years, but the things that stand out are the things that kind of, bonded you together 25 years ago. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Martin, do you agree that you're friends with Keith?
Maybe not after my...
As you can see, Keith does most of the talking. Yeah, I think what he says is true. When you're playing, the Lions is very, very special. But when you're in your playing career, it's so quick. Everything, everything's, and then you're on to the next thing, and then you're competing, and you have that angst of competition and performance and trying to win, and it's incredibly torrid in a way. When you retire, you have a little bit of time, you get a bit older, and our kids are older. It's actually a night. People say, "Do you miss it?" The taxi driver today asked me, "Do I miss it?" And he said, "Yeah, of course you miss it. You miss your playing is amazing time of your life, and we're so lucky to have done it." And I mean that genuinely. I'm not just saying that. When you stop and you look at it, you think, "Christ, we were lucky, to go and do that as long as we did." But then there's a nice period in your life, actually, when we can come and do this. We can meet up, have a beer. There's no pressure of performance on Saturday. There's none of that. We want our teams to win, but there's nothing we can do about it. And actually, you meet guys, and even some guys you played against. I remember Justin Marshall in New Zealand, number 9. I always thought he was an arrogant guy when you played against him. I got suspended for a game for clipping him. But actually, I met him over in Japan, and we spent a lot of time. It was fantastic company. We watched England, All Blacks sat next to each other. We're both stressed out about the semi-final, but that was cool. So there's that nice thing, I think, post-career when you can just have a little bit more time. Things have mellowed a bit, and you can just really enjoy each other's company.
Given it's Ireland-England week, we'll circle back to that in a moment, but you've both mentioned the Lions, where your friendship was forged, and you have so many great memories. The 97 tour of South Africa, where, of course, the Lions famously win, and then the 01 tour in Australia, where I think it still rankles that you didn't win. 2 won the first series, 2 won the second series, the second one not in your favour. I suppose the South African one has become iconic. One, because you won. Second time in history, a Lions team had won in South Africa. Not an easy thing to do. And of course, there is the documentary, Living with Lions, which has become iconic in its own way. So I know it's very famous and everyone's seen it, but just to give a sense of how unvarnished it was, here is the cameras in the dressing room before the first test. You know, it's sacrosanct, but they're in there. And you two actually, you know, Martin the captain and Keith very much captain of Ireland, you're kind of dovetailing as chief speech makers. So here's a sense of the lads about to go out against South Africa in the first test.
Fucked we be. My brother still loves that. Fucked we be.
Amazingly visceral. You're 27 there, you're 25.
25.
I read an interesting thing you said, Martin, when you told the squad, I'll go and watch the footage after the tour. I'll just make sure no one's lives are ruined. We don't, you know, I'll veto anything we don't want in there. And you were absolutely and very sincerely shocked to find out that they had been in the dressing room, the camera crew.
But yeah, that's what I was going to say, because they came. You know, we'd never done that before. They weren't a thing. You know, these flights, it's done all over the place. That wasn't a thing. So they came, start the tour, and said, we will be here all the time, and if you want us to go, we'll go. And I remember just thinking to myself, they'll be here for the gentle stuff, the soft stuff, the laughs or whatever. But there's no way they'll be there in the whole thing. And they did a great job because they just shut up, they didn't speak, and they had, you know, this is 27 years ago now, a big camera, a sound boom, a big light, wasn't there, with it? But we just got used to it. Incredibly, we just got used to it. And I think they were only kicked out of one changing room on the whole tour by Tim Robbo when he was captain. But they were in selection meeting, proper selection. We're not doing everything now. They know the camera's there, and it's done with that in mind. That is the most raw, proper foot. So when I saw them, I said, "You weren't there. You're not allowed." Of course they were. They were there the whole time for everything, and it's fantastic for everyone but for us now to have those memories, to see it, you know, Jim's speech, Geach, all of that, because it was an amazing speech, but you wouldn't be able to recall the detail of it now, all this years later, post games and everything. And to have that there, sort of for rugby, it's almost in the rugby sort of annals, isn't it? It's almost like the tablets of stone of Jim Telfer. To have that there is a wonderful thing. So it was a great thing for the game. And I was with Tom Shanklin, and he was saying that it's one of the things that inspired me to play rugby. And there's so many guys that said that, which is the ultimate, really.
They never asked a question.
Never spoke, did they?
They never spoke. So you were never asked a question to answer it. So they were always there. They were there so often, you never noticed them.
They must have, I was talking the other day, they must have hours and hours of more footage.
I remember the number. They had 171 hours of footage to make a 3-hour documentary. And they also, I think, one of the guys mortgaged his house to get the fee for it. I think the fee was 50 grand was to do it, which was a huge amount of money. And on a Lions tour, that there was a lot of doubt over whether this would be the last ever Lions tour. And so they were, like, the Lions sold the rights to that for 50 grand, which sounds very little now, but was a huge amount at the time. And it kind of changed afterwards because they kept trying to see how can you replicate that. Well, you can't replicate it by trying to copy it. And you can't, and they were trying to ask questions to see would the same things happen in 2001. I remember saying, well, actually, I don't want to answer anybody's question because now you're intruding, you know. And at that stage, they weren't at all. And it's quite freaky, actually, watching it back. I watched it at the time. My mother refused to watch it because I curse fairly significant
When I went to
numbers.
see them, they said, Heath has got 15 F words into 35 seconds. I don't know how, never been done before. Never.
Do you know the worst part? Do you know the worst part of that is? That was edited down 30. So it was 30 and 34 seconds, which is hard work.
My younger brother played, and he loves the expression, fork to be. So he'd often come out with that. You know, we'd be doing a session, he'd come out with that before we walked on the field.
You're kind of like a first batch of unaware reality television contestants.
Totally,
you know.
totally unaware.
Well, we're on the beer.
Yeah.
We're on the beer post game. We're so beautifully naive in a way. Even 4 years later, the lads were very much more aware of the whole thing. So we'd go to restaurants after. So we'd play Saturday afternoon, which was great, and the whole team would go out Saturday and have a bit of a social. And a local restaurant would just say to the management, "Look, come here, we'll feed you for free." So that's saving the management a couple of grand. So we'd do that, and they'd sell the rest of the restaurant on the fact we were there. So come and watch the lions eat, basically. Watch feeding time at the zoo. It was. I mean, during Cape Town, we were in an area, and then they were roped off, and they were packed in. So, but we loved it. I mean, they were singing songs, we were singing songs, we're drinking beer. It was just, and it's all on tape. I mean, it would not happen now.
Can I show you another clip? And it's, I think, not least because of his passing, it's all the more poignant. But even if Dottie was still alive, it would be terribly poignant.
Yeah.
I think the reason to play this is to show just how intimate the thing was. So this is Dottie Weir, and you're going to see he gets injured, and then you're going to see the sound quality isn't amazing, but you're going to see him being told your tour's over, you're going home, you're done, and he takes it with such stoicism and equanimity, and even a touch of humor, and it's like powerful. And the camera, as you'll see, stays on his face as the reality of God, I'm leaving this great tour, imminently hits him. So let's just have a look at that. And it just goes on, you know, and I'm sure for you too, it's all the more poignant, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, I actually find that very poignant when you can see the realization in his eyes that the tour is over, and it's from a piece of dirty play, stamp on the side of the knee, and it just kind of percolating into his mind. I don't know that the sound quality is bad, I just think it's Scottish guys talking, but it's very hard to understand them. Dottie, we mentioned the reunion. Dottie was at the reunion 2 years ago, and he was, like, he'd motor neuron disease, he was in a wheelchair, he was he was a fraction of the man that he had been, and yet he was still a bigger man than he had been. It was quite an amazing thing. that was incredibly poignant at the time, and like a lot of the guys got very emotional, and there was a lot of tears when they saw him because some of the guys hadn't seen him for a while. He still had an unbelievable sense of charisma and character, and I mean, he was an absolute buffoon, like dressed in the worst of tartans, of course, at all time, and he looked ludicrous half the time, and he acted ludicrous, and he's huge. But there was an unbelievable warmth to him. I had the huge honour, the privilege of going up. He wanted to go on a whiskey distillery tour, and like it was only a few weeks before he died. And we were saying, look, we'll bring the bottles to him. I think that's kind of the most obvious thing. But no, he wanted to go, and we ended up going up to the Highlands, and it was a wonderful time to kind of spend with him. And he had, it was just like, it's so sad to see him go, and almost kind of good to see the suffering end at the same time, and then his funeral afterwards and the memorial afterwards. And again, that was a wonderful time for lots of his friends to go and see him, see the family, see his sons, all those sort of things. And again, they're all those things that you have to deal with in your life. He dealt with it incredibly publicly while raising, I don't know, over 10 million pounds for motor neuron research. And he used to always say that it was something for him it was a chance for him to maybe find a cure, and he knew that wasn't going to happen. And so for that, it's interesting and sad and everything. But again, I go back to Martin's point. We have those memories; they're captured in time, and they're amazing things to actually have, because you can forget them. Of course you can, but you can't forget them when you see it on tape.
It's brutal. I mean, Rob Howley was the same. The week before the test, I think any player you wouldn't have want injured at that point was Rob Howley, and that's James, the doctor, James Robson, the Scottish doctor. He's a lovely guy, sympathetic. When Rob sprung his AC joint, so your collarbone just pops out your AC joint, and the South African doctor just said to him, "Was it like that before?" And Rob said, "No." He's in tears because he sort of knows. And the bloke just goes, "Oh, you're done, mate. Finished. Over." Like that, just brutally hits it to him. And Rob just dissolves into tears. And James just says, "Oh, we'll see what we can do." Tries to but Rob sort of knows. I mean, it was utterly brutal. We weren't there. That was done probably immediately post-game or half-time or whatever. But just, when you're missing out on that. And Rob watched the game in hospital, had surgery the next week, watched Matt Dawson score the try to win the game, and he's thinking, great, but also I'm in Cardiff in a pair of pyjamas.
You were the captain of this group, and from this vantage point, that looks like a perfectly correct, obvious decision. Yeah. But at that stage, it's worth reminding people, you weren't even the England captain.
Nope.
This is a big thing to go and do.
It was a big risk. Interesting talking to the guys, 20 years later. I think Jim Telfer was the one that needed more persuading than anyone. I think Ian McGeechan was keen. Fran was all right with it, yeah. But it was a risk. It was a big risk. But the selection for that whole tour, there was a lot huge. We were talking about this today. There was uncapped guys picked. Guys who hadn't played Test rugby that year. Guys like John Bentley hadn't played. He'd been playing rugby league for the previous 7 or 8 years. So it was a hell of a selection to find these guys. These guys had come back from rugby league. John was playing in the second division with Newcastle, as was Alan Tate. And they gave us a real hard edge physically, but a hard edge mentally, skill-wise as well.
Professionally.
Yes.
They were professional. Yeah. We were being paid, but we were still amateur.
I said the other day, if you gave them a chance to score a try, they'd score a try.
Were you thrilled to be captain, or were you thinking, oh God, I don't know about this?
A little bit of everything, yeah, because it's a huge. I love history. I know my rugby history. So if you're British Lions captain, you're going down with some of the great names, but also guys who haven't been. It's about being successful. So when people say to you, "Oh, where did you go and celebrate when you heard?" I say, "I don't go and celebrate because we haven't done anything yet. You've got to go and be successful." And we won that series by the skin of our teeth. That's how close those things are. Against all the odds, no one thought we had a chance to win down there against South Africa. So, but you need good people, you need good squads, you need good teams, and we had that. And the vibe was there very, very quickly. I came in with huge sort of, thinking why Ian Evans was probably the senior lion. He'd been on the '89 tour, captain of Wales. If I've gone in there, and Ian, there's any sort of vibe from him that why are you captain, he'd have taken the whole Welsh crew with him, and we're split before we even start. But I never got a sense of that. We had a senior players meeting very early on. He'd have been in there. You were there as senior Irish player captain. Rob Wainwright, the Scots captain. Me, I think Jason Leonard was probably there. And the vibe immediately was not anything other than how are we going to be successful? How are we going to win? How is this going to work?
Because there's a line in your book about the '01 tour 4 years later where you say about being captain again, because you never look from the outside like someone prone to massive doubt. You don't give off that vibe, but you're right. Would someone like Keith Wood have been able to lift the team in a way that I couldn't? Maybe. Woody's a good guy, always positive, more of a people person than me. So, that's interesting 4 years later, having become England captain and done it successfully in '97, that you're still kind of thinking, God, maybe Keith.
Yeah, we'd had a very, very tough year in 2000, 2001. We'd been on strike as an England team, had a hugely long season with the club. And I look back at it now, and I was probably pretty burnt out by that tour, I think. Probably exhausted. We played our first game August the 14th, 2000. The last test was July the 14th, 2001. So we got to the European Cup final, so that was a week before we met up with the Lions. I just felt that whole tour, the world had changed a huge amount in that 4 years. Where '97 felt like there was time to work on things and train. 2001 was a whirlwind. There was so much commercial pressure, so much more training pressure. I had no relationship with Graham Henry, and I don't think any of the coaches had a relationship with him either. So that was difficult, that you've got your head coach is almost isolated, and he has a wide group of assistant coaches now. Where in '97 it was Ian McGeechan, Jim, and Fran. That's your Holy Trinity. They're in charge. The whole thing had moved on. It was difficult to manage. We never had a minute, did we? It felt like we'd have meetings in airport departure lounges,
right?
Because the travel was, Australia's vast. The travel was longer, and the whole thing. Now you look back at it, was a shoot. We should have won that series comfortably. We really should have won that series comfortably.
I would have said every one of us was burnt out. I remember you and I both going in to talk to Graham. And Graham's a good guy. I don't know that he fully got the lines. He said it afterwards, actually, that he...
Well, he struggled with the whole assistant coaches thing as well, didn't he? And that. So it's still really very early in professionalism, and he was trying to experiment with how we played. That didn't really work with the English guys particularly. The Welsh guys they didn't really seem to have an opinion on it, but our guys did, so that didn't work. So the whole thing it's just a classic example of it. It was frictional all the time. It was frictional all the time. There was always something going on. The players, the test team was pretty unified, but it made it difficult, made it very difficult.
But we barely scored in the last, I don't know if we scored in the last 20 minutes of any of the tests. We scored very little at the end. I remember the last Monday before the last test, 6 people were available to train. And I don't know how many there was there. And it was just, everybody was wrecked. Right. And so, bearing in mind when you're taking a sub off a Sydney Harbour Bridge climb, Andy Nicol had been on the lash, but he hadn't for one of the days. He wasn't with us at all. He was on a supporters tour. And he got called off the bridge to come and sit on the bench for the Lions.
I thought that was poor management. Because we finished the second test and we had scrum half injuries. Rob was injured in that, he was out the tour. So it left us with 2 scrum halves, and one of whom was struggling. And I said to the little huddle after, I said, you need a scrum half over. to cover because Austin was in trouble. Didn't do anything. So when you come down to play a deciding test match for the British Lions, you shouldn't put that guy in the position or us in the position, or Andy Nichols, as Keith said, to come off a supporters tour.
Yeah.
He's sitting at breakfast trying to read the calls. He's trying to get his head around the calls. And I said to Andy, mate, if you come on, you just go and play rugby, and you can do that. Don't worry about the calls. You'll just go and play. But those things factor into people's heads. You know, this is a British Lions tour. It's not a pub team. So things like that do matter. And we should have called out a guy straight away to cover. And then we've covered. There's plenty of scrum halves who could have flown over, who would have been in form, or get Andy in all week. You know, so things like that. Where in '97, everything about that trip seemed to be different level up for the guys, particularly with the England team at that point. We'd gone to, without being arrogant, we'd gone to a different place a little bit.
Yeah.
So we were used to things being top end, and they weren't quite. But when you get that, I always say you've got to deliver top end. You know, part of that thing is when the coaches and everything, and they're delivering everything for you. Your part of that is you've got to produce that as well. So I think there was gaps in that group. So it made the whole thing very, very difficult.
To bring the Lions chat to a close, then, I guess the iconic game is the '97 win, the second test at Kings Park.
Yep.
I've never watched the game in full. I've seen clips of it. I mean, the striking thing is the Lions win 18 points to 15 without scoring a try. South Africa scored 3 tries, so it's 3 tries to zip. Neil Jenkins kicks 5 penalties, and then, of course, Gus got with the winning drop goal. Delalio says it's the most physical game I've ever played. Jim Telfer says, I thought a lot of our players froze in that second test. We just hung in there. And the South Africans, they spoke to Tom English in a recent book, and they sort of say, if you guys feel you made a mess of 01, they feel they made a mess of '97. They had a young coach. They didn't feel he was equipped. But the mad stat from that second test is they had 6 penalties kicked by 3 different players, and they missed all of them. How the hell did you win that game? I mean, that is wild.
Well, it's interesting that because you win the first test, and we always thought we had to win that. We'd been on tour. They really hadn't played together. They'd played a warm-up game against Tonga, and we sort of knew we were better coached, and we can play we'll play for 80 minutes, and we're going to be tough to beat. But it's the Springboks, and we hung in that game early on because they come out fired up, and we hung on and we outlasted them. You know, we were probably fitter. We were used to playing test matches. They'd come out of Super Rugby, and I remember them saying after the game, "Wow, that was like a proper test match." You go, "No shit." And we put them away at the end, right? We scored 2 tries late on. So, we got on that bus after that win, and we're happy we've won. But we also know what we've just been through is going to be nothing compared to what they're going to bring next week. It's going to be nothing to what they bring next week, because those guys take those things personally. It's the Springboks at home. They don't lose at home very often. And I'll never forget, we got on the bus, and things move quickly on a tour. So we've just won a test match. Everyone's on the bus. The kit man gets up and says, "Well done, guys. Training tomorrow, 8:30 for the team for Tuesday to go and play the Free State in Bloemfontein." Now, that's the game everyone wanted not to be involved with, because you want to be in the test matches. You don't want to go to Bloemfontein ever. There's no one from Bloemfontein here, is there? Go and play the Orange Free State, right? That's a trap game midweek between the test matches where they're going to take you to the Afrikaner heartland and kick the shit out of you, right? That's what that game is, and we all know it. So the midweek team have got to do it. So they've got to come down and train Sunday morning. And Scott Gibbs was sat there, and I can see him now, and he said, "Jono, we should all come down tomorrow and train." And I went, "Gibbsy, you're spot on." So we get on the mic, everyone back down at 8 o'clock tomorrow. And this doesn't sound much, right? But we're just over 12 hours post-test match, because it was played 5 or 6 o'clock, the game. We're all down back in the hotel in Cape Town. We go out. The rain was coming horizontally across the field. We hold the bags for the midweek guys, right? And we do a session. And it's almost a token session, but it's saying we're all back in this, and actually the next job is Tuesday night. The guys went down there, and they played one of the great Lions games. midweek. They thrashed them, played some great rugby. And we stayed in Durban. We all flew to Durban. They flew to Bloemfontein. We stayed in Durban and watched it and were inspired by it. And you go out and play on that Saturday. They came out for that second test. We used to run out. They sprint out like lunatics, like they're running for their, like there's a lion in the changing room chasing them out. And they started that game. I remember we kicked off to them. They got the ball and they almost just got it, picked us up, and just rammed us to the other end of the field. And we were about 30 yards, 40 yards back in. I got myself off the floor, looked at Lawrence, I think it caught Lawrence Delalio's eye, and we just had that look of, wow, we're holding on. So I think Jim says we froze, held on. No, we were holding on. Yeah. But it was everything we took to hold on.
Yeah, I don't think there was any freeze in it. I mean, I remember, again, the first scrums in those games, and those guys were so much bigger than we were. Oz Durant I think he was 21 stone.
Oz Durant's an enormous man.
Like a huge guy
world of big
against Wally, and Wally was 16 stone. And they're all kind of that sort of size. They hit the scrum, we go back in the scrum. People say, oh yeah, you're going back in the scrum. It's horrendous. I mean, you're shortened by the scrum. And they thought from the first week, because we had done well in the last 10 minutes, that we'd embarrassed them. This was their strength, and we'd embarrassed them in their homeland. So they said they're going to outdo that the next time. So they're going to scrummage us harder the next time. And they did, and it was horrendous. But there's no change of subs like there is now. So we're all on for 80 minutes. Those guys were huge guys. But for the last 30 minutes, they were knackered.
Pumped out their eyeballs.
Yeah.
Pumped up out their eyeballs. Gregor, there's a great book, that Tom English book, because there's perspective, 20 years later. Gregor, with Gregor Townsend playing 10, who was that sort of mercurial, ball in two hands. Look, never got a second. He said, I couldn't breathe.
Right.
I could not breathe. And that was I watched it on tape before I did the interview for that book. I watched that game on tape. I thought I'll flick through it. I actually watched the whole thing because the chaos and the intensity of the game. It's not organized defenses like they are now. It's just guys flying at you. You get the ball, you got guys flying at you. And we were holding on because they're pumped out there, but they can't do that for the whole game. And second half, we drag ourselves back in. And the big thing for me as captain was the referee was a little French guy called Joe Molloy.
Yeah.
And he looks like a little geography teacher, with his little specs on. And he's in that world, when you're playing the Afrikaans boys are massive and our guys. And he was very quiet and unassuming. But I always think with the French refs, they've seen utter chaos. If they've refereed French rugby at the lower level, as they will have done when they come up, they will have seen chaos that we've never seen in terms of madness and fighting and the crowds fighting players. So they don't get stressed out by it. They don't get tense. And the Springboks wouldn't listen to him. And it's in that book. I remember as a young captain thinking, they're not listening to him. And he's taking offense. He's trying to tell them not to do things, and they're not listening. And we were getting the edge on the penalties. Right. And even 20 years later, this is the mentality of the South Africans. One of the players has written, we were doing things, and he told us not to, but they weren't really that important. And he kept on penalising us for it. And you think, you've not even learned 20 years later. Stop doing it. The ref says don't do it. Don't do it. And you won't get, so they have that mentality a little bit. We got some penalties. That's how the game goes. And we got some penalties. And Jenks would kick him. And if they never get out of sight, if they never get beyond 6-7 points, you're in the game. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if you've scored tries, and you're in the game. If that changes, and we have to change how we play, and the game changes, but it didn't. So it was always tight. And we've picked a guy who can't play fullback at fullback. So we've lost an attacking piece because we had 3 or 4 better fullbacks than him on that trip who could have played and attacked, but he could kick goals. And that's the card. That's the selection we made, and that won us the test match because he didn't miss.
He didn't miss. As the game went on, they thought they were going to beat us into submission, and they started panicking, and we became calmer.
Right.
Now, I have to say we were calmer, and when that final whistle blew, I've never been, there's no celebration. I've never been as tired in my life. There was, yes, you put your hands up, and then you can barely lift your hands up. And it was as if, okay, that's all the energy now gone. And it was was exhilarating, but it was, thank God it's over. And thank God we've won.
We'll draw a line under it with you two aren't in this, but I think Wonderwall was the anthem of the tour.
One of them.
Yeah. The 90s were just better. So, I mean, Oasis are on their pop.
The other one was Insomnia.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
I can't get no sleep.
Well, here's the dressing room then, post second test. The perfect bit of editing there.
Jim in that with Geach, they sat in the stand watching the game. It's hilarious, isn't it? Because they're like an old couple.
Talking to each other, yeah.
Stadler and Waldorf.
The Afrikaners are giving Jim some grief, and Geach has got, stop it, leave it. It's hilarious. I mean, you wouldn't. I mean, now they sat in the stand watching the game as the coaches. I mean, it's just
complete change of tack. You, at the age of 38, took the position of England coach.
Yeah.
People can forget you finished second in the Six Nations in 2009. Ireland won the Grand Slam. That was a close game, that Ireland-England game. And you won a Six Nations in 2011.
Yeah.
And yet I think if people are asked about that period, they think of Johnson under pressure, post-match interviews where he's getting tetchy with the, God, is nothing good enough. And then the World Cup, kind of tabloid dream, the dwarf throwing stuff. And you're trying to like it's ludicrous. They're like, well,
no dwarfs got hurt, apparently.
There was a bit of that, and you're like, can we stop talking about the dwarf throwing competition in press conferences? At the World Cup, we still actually have a media scrum, which of the 2011 World Cup, which kind of captures the vibe at the time. So you're 38, 39, 40, very young, no real coaching experience to speak of. Was that an enjoyable experience?
No, it was interesting, but it's not, because it dragged the game through something it didn't need to be. It became a media fest. We said to the boys, look, you're in New Zealand. If you do these things, this will happen. And they did those things, and that happened. Yeah. So once that thing is rolling, like you say, you can't stop the momentum or the narrative. The narrative is what it is. And actually, that team did win the championship that year. We came here to try and win a Grand Slam and got beaten. But so that bit gets forgotten, and it's all about that other bit. So, it was. I remember thinking at the time, once the cat's out the bag, it's out the bag. It's not going back in, because people don't want the media at that point. It's more than just the sports media. So all they want is a story. All they want is the story, because that's something to report. Otherwise, there's nothing to report.
And generally, with very little experience, taking that job, did you do a good job?
Did I do a good job?
Yeah, I'd be curious for your thoughts on that.
I think, like anything, there's bits of it you go, that was okay, we did all right. We actually, a lot of players came through in that era where they hadn't. So when I first got in, we were picking a lot of older guys to try and hold the fort. But actually, in 18 months, we got quite a few guys. Dan Cole came through, Courtney Laws, that played for a long, long time. Yeah. Ben Youngs came through, Chris Ashton, Dylan, Haskell, that played for England for a long time. So I think we did a good job of introducing them and not burning them, because suddenly in the game, if you came in, didn't play well, with social media, the whole internet thing's in full flow, these guys are getting... if I came and played for England and made my debut in the 90s, didn't play well, it wouldn't even be reported. You might get a line saying, that would be it, and you might get dropped. That would be it, but you wouldn't get the deluge of stuff these guys get now. So we did a good job of that. Did I do a good job in that World Cup? No, we didn't. We should have. Yeah, we let it get to where it got to. So ultimately, you have to say no.
And I presume when they offer you that job, you can't turn it down, even if you feel you're not quite ready.
Yeah, look, you do things in life. We were talking about, guys post career. Things happen in your life. I've been incredibly fortunate in most of my rugby career to do what I've done, to have the opportunity to play with good teams. People always say to you, who's the best players you play with, and you come out with these names, and they're all the same names. They all played in winning teams. We've played against some fantastic players. I just mentioned Rob Howley. When Rob retired, I said, look, he scored some tries that if Gareth Edwards had scored them, you'd be seeing them played on repeat forever. But because he played in a poor Welsh team, and generally they weren't winning tries, they sort of get lost in the mix. And he was a fantastic player. So I was fortunate to play in, very, very successful teams throughout my career. So you take the ups. I've always taken the highs and the lows. You try and smooth them out because you're never that great and you're never that bad.
Did it put you off going back into management again?
Yeah, possibly for a little bit. But then you think, well, is that what I really want to do in sport? And nothing's ever really grabbed me to come back in and do it at a high level. I've coached at the kids level, which is in its own right very interesting.
Do you intimidate the children? Do you intimidate the children?
No, Christ no. They don't listen to a word I say.
I know.
But that's a lot like the England team, really, I guess. I love rugby. We love rugby. The whole thing of it, and that I say to people all the time. Us in the changing room there having a sing-song and we've achieved something. Okay, it's the Lions and it's historic and it's on video and we all remember it. But it's the same buzz you get when you do it for your club team, your age group team, whatever it is. That's the joy of playing sport. And a sport like rugby is such a team game. I have the same sort of banter and fun with the guys I played with when I was 14 or 15 that I do with these guys when I meet them, because we're all rugby players who've met along the way. Now we had the ability and the desire to try and do it at the highest level, and we're lucky enough to do it. But I remember, I tell this story all the time. I played for a junior club in Leicester from 14 to 17 before I joined the Tigers, and we had a great time. And about 15 years ago, one of the lads rings me up. He's moved away. He's coming up back to the area with his lad to play. Can I put him in touch with a local club? Yeah. And he said, yeah, come along. We'll have a bit of a reunion. So I walk into my local rugby club. So I'm 43. I haven't seen one of these guys since we were 17. So what's that, 26 years. He stood at the bar. He was a winger. He's got all his flicky hair still from the 80s on, lucky. And I see him at the bar, and I said, you all right, mate? And he went, yeah, you? I went, yeah. He said, what have you been up to? I said, not a lot. You? Not really? You got a pint? Yeah. And we're back into it. Don't need any big kerfuffle. It's just bang, we're rugby, and we're back into being mates without, 26 years, 26 minutes. Doesn't make any difference.
We'll finish on the World Cup win. Keith, I'm curious, so you both retire, as you said, within a few weeks of each other. Given that you knew Martin and knew quite a few of the English players in that final against Australia, were you cheering on England? Were you hoping that...
That is a good question.
I was, and I wasn't. And about 3 weeks after...
That, my friend, is a cop-out.
No, but it also is the truth, because... and I know this is a bit of a trite line, but I rang Martin about 3 weeks afterwards, and I said, look, I'm delighted you won. I said I was shouting for Australia for part of it, and then I was shouting. He said, well, of course you're shouting for us, because we're friends. And I said I had to put 31 years of personal history and 800 years of subjugation behind me. Well, he didn't understand what subjugation was, but that was okay. But I did want them to win, because I wanted a Six Nations team, we were Five Nations for most of our career, but I wanted one of the teams, and I did the things that we shared on the lines. I mean, I always said it, that when we met on the lines, and when I played against Martin beforehand, I absolutely hated him, because he was a brilliant rugby player. He was very big. He was incredibly intimidatory to the referee always, which was quite interesting. And that's definitely one of the reasons he was captain, because it was, as he's throttling you, he would convince the referee that this was fully within the laws, and that was absolutely fine. But it was a great joy then to suddenly have him on your side.
I'll bet.
And that's a really cool thing to have. Yeah. And, we had a pretty fallow time in the 90s with Ireland, so to try and go on a team that had the potential and possibility of winning was amazing. To then win is amazing. And so then you're looking at a chunk of guys that you've been on 2 lines tours with, you get to know very well, and you see them playing, and you say, yeah, I want them to do well. And like that's a cool thing. And I wanted us to do better. And I thought we could have gone further than we did. So I'm annoyed. He retired 2 weeks after me. I wanted to retire on that time. But yeah, it's interesting. I used to always say, we hate. There's no real hate, but there is an extra drive, and there still is always an extra little bit of oomph when Ireland play England, and that's pretty important, and will be pretty important on this weekend. And it's changed somewhat over the last period of time because Ireland have been in the ascendancy, but Ireland will be bitter enough for having lost last year, so that makes it kind of different too.
For purposes of time, just to summarise that 4-year cycle, 99 to 03, and how good England became. 40 matches, you only lost 5 of them. You won 3 of the 4 Six Nations. You won away in New Zealand, South Africa, Australia, France. You were this just kind of hardened, experienced, lots of depth, can play any style of rugby you want to play, we can play it kind of side. One of the questions that's often asked about that group with Woodward is, to what extent was it like Woodward's masterclass, or to what extent was it just this phenomenal dressing room driving it? And I heard you asked, obviously in research for this evening, asked that. And I hadn't realised, I think, is it at the end of full time in the World Cup final, at 14 points apiece, it's an extraordinary thought when you think about it. It's 14-0, it's just gone full time in the World Cup final, you have a few minutes together before extra time. Woodward doesn't do all right, everybody, few quick words. Talks to a few individuals, but almost it's remarkable, so self-assured as to say, these boys have it. And that was the right thing to do, presumably. That must be so rare, that kind of a dynamic.
Yeah, because you think in that situation, that's his moment, isn't it? And you have to say so. I have to say something. I've got to say, what do I say? I want to say something. So for him to have the confidence in us that they've got it is a testament to what he created, I think, or what we become. And you have to work at that. It's not easy. We had to work at that, and there's friction, and there's tension, and there's angst because there's control, there's ego, all that stuff's involved with it. And it's interesting now. I was with him last week. 20 years later, you can see that, and it's all a bit far more relaxed now. But when you're in those situations, there's a huge amount of pressure. You forget now, because you look back at the good times. Whenever we see these, we look at the good times and remember the good times. But there's a huge amount of pressure. So the World Cup, particularly playing at this level, the high level, is dealing with that. Some guys opt out. Some guys are good enough. They have the ability to do it. They get up there, they have a taste of it, and they think, this is too much for me. This is too, definitely do. And whether they admit it to themselves, even to themselves years later, I don't know. But there's some guys you think, you're good enough to do this, but they get up and it's intense. I'm not just talking about on the field, off the field, the whole thing, the pressure. So it's dealing with that pressure is immense. And that World Cup period, if you're really, truly honest about it, when we're actually out there doing it, we just want to win it and go.
Yeah.
Because you're in that pressure cooker. I remember being in the last week, and it was okay, but you're just thinking, we've been together so much, so long, the intensity's just there. Just let's get this thing won and get home. I remember, you're right, we were very experienced. So you're also trying to take it in and remember it and enjoy it, but can you really at that point? It's an interesting question. But if you're lucky enough to be in a team that has the ability to win it, I played in 3. So 95, we won a Grand Slam. We beat the defending champions in the quarter-final. We think, we've got a chance here. Play the All Blacks and Jonah in the semi. 10 minutes in, we're not winning anything. And that that's a sobering place to be when you've got 70 minutes to play the All Blacks. You're already 3 tries down. They've got a behemoth running riot on the wing. The whole team is excellent. The whole team is fantastic. And you're just playing out for a little bit of credibility. 99, we worked just as hard as 03. We worked our socks off. We built ourselves up into that. But we probably didn't quite believe in ourselves enough. Probably didn't have the right pieces, missing a few pieces in the team. Like you get Jason Robinson into the group. Benny Cohen became a world-class player. Johnny Wilkinson's had 4 more years of playing. And you think, you're right, we had huge depth as well. We could lose players and still be good. But you've got to go and win. We're 10-3 down at half-time to Wales. We're 10-0 down after 20 minutes to Samoa. You've got to find a way to drag it back. And actually, looking back, that was good because it wasn't smooth sailing. It was never smooth sailing in that tournament. The Aussies are into you all the time. They're always into you. And they do a good job of it. So we had to deal with that. So it's a great time, but it's also hugely pressurised. And so to come through it and win, it does give you a sense of satisfaction.
From memory, for the winning drop goal, the Wilkinson drop goal, you make the last carry. And just, so, sport's interesting. You're obviously nervous at the start of a game, I'm sure, but then you get into it and it's fine.
Yeah.
Continuous motion and you forget yourself a bit. I would presume, as someone's about to throw you that greasy ball, and this is the last carry.
Don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it, don't drop it.
You must go back to, oh God.
You're absolutely right. It's a big, big game. And it was my last test match, right? Yeah. So we've got that experience and that you've got to look like you know what you're doing and you can handle it. I actually wasn't super, super nervous for the World Cup, bizarrely. The first game, the second pool game, South Africa, was the most tense game of my life. So if you lose at that stage, it's very, very difficult to come back. And we'd have had, our media would have piled on us the biggest, tons of manure. We'd never have walked out of that shit pile. So actually get to the final, we're playing a team we know very well. We know we can beat them. We know they're good and they can beat you as well. And after 3 minutes of the game or whatever, I'm thinking, this feels like a test match. This feels like a test match. Let's just do our thing. That's what I said to the players the night before. Let's just do our thing. You don't have to overplay. Don't freeze, don't underplay. Do our thing, which is win. We'll find a way. And that's what it became. It just became find a way to score some points and win. A game we probably should have won comfortably, but we don't. You find yourself in that situation. And when we went to extra time, I always say we just naturally walked up into the middle of the field. We didn't really know what was happening, but we just huddled up. And I just thought, before anyone says anything, I'll just look at everyone, just had a quick look around the guys. And I just got this sense of we're going to win. I just looked into the eyes, and that's not me, right? I don't normally have those feelings of it's going to go well. Normally have a feeling of dread and doom. And I just looked around and thought, we're going to win this. Because if you'd said to us, before the tournament, before, the start of the day, whenever, extra time against Australia, what do you think? We'd have said that's ours. Not arrogantly, but we knew we were fitter than them. For all their talk of us being old, we had a super, super fit team and hardened. We played a lot more rugby than them. Our forward pack was, tougher than them. They are skillful and smart rugby players. But I just looked around and thought we'll win. So we don't have to worry about all that, because momentum had shifted, right? Their crowd's going crazy. They've got a spring in their step. The whole game's turned round. But so what? 20 minutes, let's go to it. And to have that experience around you and guys who can actually operate. Because it's okay for me to say things. They've got to be able to do it. That's what it's about. They've got to be able to do it in that moment. So that final bit of the game, Matt's made that break. And I get up from a totally ineffective clear out of the previous ruck. We look back at it, it was useless. And then the game just seemed to pause, and we were thinking, are we going to go for the drop goal? Because Neil Back, the 7, has got his hands on the ball, and he's looking slightly unsure. And I'm just thinking, guys, for Christ's sake, let's just go one more time. Let's just relax to a point. Just be calm, and we'll go one more time and get ourselves set. So I just looked at Backy, and I'm just trying to get his eye and go, yeah, give it to me, man, give it to me. And it was a crap pass. It was on my hip. And that does cross your mind, because you do that in practice without even thinking about it, pass catch. But that's why you practice. I say to kids, that's why you practice, because when the moment comes, you will pull it off. So it's pass catch. Everyone says you made that vital extra meter. I didn't make any ground because I didn't want to. I didn't want to turn the ball over. Actually, I also wanted to hold off, really, and just, because if Australia had surrounded me and got the ball, that's their chance to. So we'll go in soft and we'll just win the ball and put it on a platter, and it's a simple skill. Johnny's drop goal, it's a drop goal from the 22, but it's back to pressure, isn't it? It's that moment. It's the World Cup final, drop goal, last minute. Just do your thing. And, when the ref blows the whistle, it's a game of rugby. The weird thing about it is it's epic. It's a World Cup. Everyone remembers it. It's still a game of rugby, 15 versus 15.
Yeah. Well, obviously, Keith can speak for himself. 6 months on from the red carpet situation, we were all thrilled that you guys got over the line. We were all cheering at home.
Look, if you're English, you learn very quickly. There's some history. Whoever we play, there's history, isn't there? Scotland, we fight in them forever. Wales, we suppressed them 500-600 years ago. Stop. Ireland, Argentina, France. They all, and the Kiwis and the Aussies. South Africa. Jesus, they've got the things they do not like us. And you look at it, you think that's fair enough. That's fair enough. The Kiwis and the Aussies, so it's great. I love it, because every game you play, you come here with England, even when we had that, a really good team in the 90s and we were mainly winning.
Yeah.
You come away from home in the Six Nations and you knew you were in for a game.
Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. One very last one, and then we'll turn to Six Nations this year. That 2003 rather team, they kind of defined by like a mental strength as part of their thing. And recently there was the Unbreakable documentary. And so you see an array of men with different situations. There's a couple who think they've probable CTE and there's early onset dementia, and they cite, the game as it was. But there's guys talking very openly about marital difficulties or financial difficulties or mental health. And it's a hard question to answer, but I'm sure you've thought about it to some extent or other. That high-level environment, that grizzled, tough world, to what extent is that a contributory factor, do you think, or what's your hunch?
It's difficult to say. I think when you do something that intense and that important, that feels that important, it's everything. I said that game in 2003 felt like everything. When you come away from that, it's difficult to replicate it. But I think you have to. I understood. I probably wouldn't ever have something to replace it. You won't have anything to replace it. So you have to sort of understand that a little bit. Now, there's a bit of me that says good, because the pressure on you is, immense, but a bit of you also likes that. Yeah. So you will always miss it. So it's difficult post-career. Guys finish. I was so lucky. I finished. That was my last game as a World Cup final. It was in, and I even remember thinking then, some of these guys are doing this at 24. What do they do now? It's difficult. We all played. Most of us played the following week. I was training on Thursday back in Leicester. So we were back Tuesday morning, trained on Thursday. And I never forget, we're doing one-on-one tackle practice. I'm doing it with a 18.5 stone Neanderthal-looking 22-year-old who's trying to take me out. He's trying to take me out and take my position. And I've got to encourage him to do that, because that's what he's got to do. He's got to not respect anyone when he's on the field in that sense, and be physical and aggressive. So you're back into that world straight away. Yeah. But it was weird, because you're out of that. So post-career can be awkward for guys, especially if they lose. If it goes. Most people don't really get to end the way they want it to end. Unfortunately, it's either injury, they're not getting selected, they don't get the contract they want. That's life, unfortunately. That's life. We don't, we all have our ups and downs. And
you have to readjust.
Yes.
And
how did you find it?
I found, I didn't have the highs. All right. And
you had a few, come on.
I had a few, but but I didn't. It isn't. That isn't the point. It's the point of when you stop, because the thing that defines you as a person is playing rugby, and you know you're going to do that for a period of time. You also know you're going to stop, and it isn't as if you're retiring and that's the end of your work life. And I remember doing a press conference, and like I retired 2 weeks before Martin, and they said, "Are you going to be a coach?" And I said, "No, that's just not in my future." And they said, "What?" I said, "I'll be in the office next Monday." It was Monday week, but you know, it was. But my idea was I was going to go back into work, and even through my career, I worked all the way through my career. And for me, when I stopped, I don't know whether it's part of the history in our family that Dad had played for the Lions and played for Ireland, that rugby was part of life. It wasn't all of it. And so that when it finishes, you just go and move back into the next thing. And that was my mindset for it. And I think a lot of guys struggled without the coordination of your day. You were told what to do, what to wear, every single element of it, where you should be, what you should eat, all that sort of stuff.
We also had the advantage of coming in.
Having worked.
Yes. So we were the generation who were amateur, and then in that period when it was a little bit of both, and then professional. So it gave you an understanding, it gave you a slight amount of maturity. You know what the real world is a little bit. You know, there's worse jobs than guys moaning about training and workload. There's worse jobs than this. You can be in the factory. There's worse. There's out. Most people, if you're lucky enough to do a job you really enjoy, you're very, very fortunate, because it's called work, isn't it? And work has a definition. You know, it's something you've got to do often and get through and do it, and you make the best of it and whatever. But being a professional athlete, you know, I struggle a little bit with sometimes now people talking about their sacrifice when they're a high-paid professional athlete. You know, there's hard jobs. People are out there doing hard jobs, never more so than now, trying to make a living. You know, I always felt lucky to be a professional athlete and do it. I never thought it was hard work. I never struggled with the training in that sense, because there's lots of other things you can be doing that you don't enjoy other than this. So I always had that little bit of understanding it was a privilege, where if you come in and that's all you've ever done, it is a little bit different. It is different.
Fellas, that was great. We're going to talk about matters at hand now, but before we do that, round of applause. Martin Johnson, Keith Wood, everybody.